an ambitious young woman loved by the community.
Everyone was friends with Terry.
She was hardworking, had 2 jobs.
By 21, she owned a home.
Has her future ripped away.
This was a particularly brutal attack.
They stabbed her multiple times on that road.
This would have been a horrifying death.
Police discover unwanted admirers prone to violence.
He was covered in blood and had blood in his hair.
And always carrying a knife.
He was jealous and said that he'd kill her.
But the evidence leads nowhere.
The investigation is getting older and older and harder to solve.
I didn't think we were going to get an answer for this case.
Until a surprise breakthrough.
I was beyond excited. I actually shouted, "Oh my God," at my desk.
Points to a killer off the radar.
Right away, I'm like, who's that guy?
Why? Why did someone do this?
People said, oh, no, he wouldn't kill anybody, but he had this pretend life.
He had no criminal record. He did not emerge as a likely suspect at all.
Germantown, Wisconsin, a sleepy village celebrated as one of the best places to live in America.
I grew up in Germantown. It's, a small community. I would ride my bike to the store for my mom. It was not someplace that you were afraid of.
Germantown is a small town near Milwaukee, a lot of farmland, a lot of open spaces, just a lot of dairy farming, some factories, and homes.
But on May 28, 1999, this bedroom community wakes to a horrific crime.
Yeah, we're having a body up here on River Lane. There's a green car there, green Pontiac car. She's laying by the curb. There's blood on the road.
I got a phone call that there was a suspected homicide in the industrial park. I immediately went to the crime scene. I saw a vehicle on the side of the road facing west, a large amount of blood in the roadway. I observed what appeared to be footwear impressions in blood. I saw what appeared to be drag marks of blood, 2 large pools of blood, and alongside the vehicle was a female lying face down. When we rolled her over, she had a significant number of what appeared to be stab wounds on her front. She had stab wounds on both sides of her neck.
She had some blood on her hands, and we're always hoping that there's a fight so she can either scratch the attacker. So the hands were swabbed for DNA.
We proceeded with the perspective. She may have not been expecting it, and things went south very, very fast. I do believe there was rage in this case.
That usually is indicative of personal, that they know each other, and it's almost to the point of overkill.
Who was this woman who had been so savagely murdered? Investigators looked to the victim's car for answers.
The vehicle itself appeared to be parked in a reasonable manner alongside the road.
Her car keys were by her body, so she probably had them when she got out of her car and then dropped them in the fight.
The keys indicated that she willingly got out of the vehicle and talked to someone, and then the homicide occurred. The stabbing continued not only in the roadway, but on the grass at 2 different locations, and then it looked like it may have occurred alongside the vehicle.
There's blood spatter and cast off on her wheel, on her hood, on her fender, and up on her windshield.
Her purse was in the vehicle. There was $200 in her purse.
This was not a robbery. This was something else.
After finding a driver's license, police determine the victim is 22-year-old Teresa Wesolowski.
Out on the road, there was tire acceleration marks leading away from the pool of blood in the roadway, as if you put your foot on the accelerator and peeled out, confirming to us that there was another vehicle in front of her where she was more than likely stabbed.
Police comb the crime scene, but no murder weapon is found. As detectives try to make sense of what happened to Teresa, her lifelong best friend Michelle gets a call.
Terry's brother called. and it was early. Not that it was out of the ordinary because we were all so close. And so I answered, and he's like, Michelle, Terry never came home last night. Well, I'm going to start calling police departments. And Germantown said, we have her name on file. You'll have to come and speak to a detective.
Michelle and Teresa's brother rushed to the station. They had last seen Teresa the day before when she left for work.
I'll never forget, the officer was in front of me. And I said, where is she? And he said, I'm sorry, she's gone. And I just remember screaming, someone just told me my friend is gone. What does gone mean?
Born in Germantown, Wisconsin, Teresa Wesolowski grew up an outgoing girl with a magnetic personality.
Everyone was friends with Terry. We became best friends in 6th grade, and from that moment on, we were inseparable. We were sisters. There were not many people that called her Teresa. She was always Terry. I think the only time that I remember her being called Teresa was when her mom was mad. When we had done something wrong. It was always just her and I on the playground. I mean, we were just always, I want to say, running the neighborhood, you know? I can't remember a weekend that I wasn't at her house.
As she got older, Teresa was fiercely independent, buying a car at 16 and moving out on her own at 18.
She was working at Cousins Subs in Mequon, and she would go there at 7 a.m., and she would get done by 1, and she would head over to Stone Container, and she would work till 11 o'clock at night.
Despite a heavy work schedule, Teresa loved to be social.
Oh, Terry was fun. You know, Terry liked attention, and she definitely liked the attention from men. Men just seemed more attracted to her. She was young, she was beautiful. Any guy would have wanted that.
How, then, did someone so driven and well-liked meet such a horrible fate?
Young female, you know, at the beginning of her life, getting things together, and it's ended.
Back at the station, investigators reach out to Teresa's family and friends to piece together the hours leading up to her death.
Her shift ended at 11, and the last that anybody saw of her that we know of was that she got into her vehicle and left that parking lot.
During the interviews, detectives get their first tip.
That morning, the officers received a contact from somebody at the Department of Public Works. They had a channel on the same radio system that the police department was on, so they would know that the homicide occurred. They indicated that somebody driving a truck pulled into the parking lot. An individual got out, and they said that he was covered in blood and had blood in his hair.
Is this man somehow connected to the crime scene? Detectives head over to interview the witnesses, who tell police they'd never seen the man before.
We were told the truck driver asked if there was a hospital nearby, and then he indicated now he'd just clean up in the bathroom, which he did, and then left.
It's very common that the person who's doing the attacking gets stabbed too or cuts himself, especially if there's a struggle. Now we had a suspect, a viable suspect, and now we needed to find that person to figure out what happened.
Coming up, detectives uncover suspects with violent tendencies.
He said he can cut people like paper. He could become abusive and violent.
And untangle a web of deception.
Well, he was never married. He didn't have any kids.
He said, I don't want to be a snitch.
Leading them to a suspect they never imagined.
We really felt that we had turned a corner on this case.
It was almost surreal. It got me because it wasn't anyone I knew.
Hours after finding Teresa Wesolowski stabbed to death at the side of the road, police search for a man seen covered in blood at a nearby public works building.
We had a very good police artist. He did a sketch of the individual based on the statements from the witnesses, put the word out there into the community.
While police wait for leads on the bloody man, they shift their attention to Teresa's home to look for clues.
I went down to Teresa's house. We made a search of the residence. I checked the shoes in the residence against the footwear impression at the crime scene, and none of them matched. So the footwear impression at the scene weren't Teresa's.
Investigators talked to Teresa's family and friends, hoping to learn more about her. They learned she was dating someone named Charlie.
Charlie was a young man who didn't hold down a lot of jobs very well. He was staying at his parents' house. They had been dating for a few months prior to her homicide.
We had known Charlie since grade school. We grew up with Charlie. He was 3 years older than us.
We had some people that we interviewed that said they fought a lot or she wanted to break up with him.
I didn't think Charlie was good for anyone. In Terry's mind, he was temporary.
A couple of weeks before her homicide, we found out that he borrowed her car while she was at work and failed to pick her up. She walked to the tavern, and then they got in a bit of an argument, and she finally said enough is enough.
Friends worried how Charlie might react to Teresa moving on.
Some of the people indicated that Teresa told them this boyfriend was jealous and said that if he caught her going out with somebody else, he'd kill her.
He said, give me 2 weeks and you won't have your friend anymore. You're like, what do you mean I won't have my friend?
So that it raises a flag that we have to determine if it got worse after that or was it just a one evening spat.
You know, stabbing is very personal. That usually is indicative that they know each other.
Why did someone do this? What did she do that was so bad that someone had to stab her repeatedly in this crime of passion?
Police immediately bring Charlie in for questioning.
Charlie was very nervous and seemed to act like he didn't really want to be there.
When police asked Charlie where he was the night of the murder, he says he was home.
He lived in the basement of his parents' house, and he was alibied by his mother. I remember the mother claiming there's no way he could get out of this house without me hearing it.
However, he slept in the basement, which the patio door opens up from the basement outside, so he could leave the house without his parents knowing. At times, Teresa got off of work at 11 at night, and she's found in the morning at 5 or 6 o'clock. So his alibi has weaknesses. It's not airtight.
Could Charlie have snuck out, driven to see Teresa, and murdered her?
Did Charlie have access to a car? He borrowed cars from people a lot. So could he have had a car that night? Yeah, he could have. The homicide's probably less than 5 miles from his house.
Police looked to the tire track evidence.
The tire tracks at the scene were measured and documented. I made contact with the Michigan State Police, who have a database of vehicles. They came back with a list of vehicles based on manufacturer specifications that could have created that. And it's quite a large list.
While detectives continue to investigate Charlie, they also turn to the box factory where Teresa worked.
Whenever you have a homicide like this and it's right down the road from where she worked, obviously your biggest pool of suspects has to be the guys she worked with. There was a fair number of men that were interested in her, and there were some that, had dated her. There were some that wanted to date her.
It wasn't like she was going out and dating them. She just liked hanging out with them.
So we went to the factory to determine who had contact with Teresa, and is there anything that stands out and points to any particular individual as possibly having done this.
We interviewed one of her co-workers named Mark Lebecki. Mark Lebecki worked the same shift as Teresa.
Mark was known as a soft-spoken but well-liked guy at the factory.
He's a very quiet individual, very reserved. Most people would describe him as very mellow.
Working just a few machines away from each other, Mark and Teresa had become close.
He talked to her at work. He was a nice, likable person.
And it got to the point where they developed kind of a friendship.
Unlike the men at the factory who wanted to date Teresa, Mark preferred sharing stories about his family.
Mark Lebecki told Teresa that he had a couple kids and he kept photos of them in his wallet. He would show them to Teresa saying, "These are my kids."
He talked to her enough to create a relationship that she felt the need to go and talk to him when he needed a friend.
Mark tells police he is saddened by Teresa's death. He also remembers something was off with her the night she died.
He indicated that he saw her that night of the homicide and commented that it looked like she was having a bad day, and she said, yeah, something was jamming in her machine.
She just laughed it off and moved on.
Having no reason to question Mark further, police turned to coworkers with a less amicable relationship with Teresa.
There were some statements from individuals that they observed her having an argument with somebody by the vehicle before the night of the homicide.
The man Teresa was arguing with is identified as her coworker, Isaac Alvarez. When police dig into his background, they find some troubling details.
Isaac Alvarez was just a little bit weird, and he always carried a knife.
At one point, he was upset with a coworker, and he said, I'm going to cut that cracker, or I'm going to knife that bitch. He told somebody else that, he can cut people like paper.
His comments about cutting up a supervisor, those are the comments that we heard, and those are the comments that kept our interest in him.
To find out more, police look into Isaac's personal life.
His ex-wife indicated that he did have a knife he always kept on his belt. And she indicated that he could become abusive and violent after one drink.
Police bring in Isaac to shed light on his relationship with Teresa and why they were arguing at work.
And in talking to him about Teresa, you could see the emotion coming out of him. This was very stressful for him. That's also the type of stressor that might cause somebody to commit a homicide.
Then, Isaac reveals something else.
He did ask Teresa if she wanted to meet him for a drink. And Teresa, being who Teresa was, she didn't say, no way. She said, well, we'll see. He shows up and she's not there. Is that rejection?
Had Teresa's rejection sent Isaac into a murderous rage?
We asked Isaac to take a polygraph. Because of Isaac's strange behaviors, outbursts, maybe prone to violence, and always carrying a knife, and he was seen in the parking lot area that night, he was on our main suspect list.
While investigating the stabbing death of Teresa Wesolowski, police focus on her coworkers.
She's working in a factory populated by mostly men. That sets up a scenario where you're going to have people trying to ask her out. She was outgoing and she was friendly, so people could perceive that as being led on, where in fact she was probably just being nice.
She always tried to let him down easy. She would always be like, well, I don't want to hurt his feelings. She just wanted to make sure that they still wanted to be her friend.
At the police station, investigators interview one of those workers, Isaac Alvarez. Witnesses saw Isaac argue with Teresa before the night of her death.
Isaac's alibi, when he was interviewed, he was home. He lives with a 50-plus-year-old lady. His story was he went to bed at 9 o'clock, and he may have had a conversation with her when she came home, but he doesn't recall. She says she had a conversation with him 11:15, 11:30 at night, and she thought it was around 1 o'clock when he went to bed. It's a little different than his story. Well, in his case, is that person willing to lie for you? We don't know. So that's not an airtight alibi.
Police convince Isaac to take a polygraph.
He was somewhat deceptive and not answering the questions in the proper manner, and so we believe that he was trying to skew the results of the polygraph.
You couldn't get a good answer from him.
So because of that, it was ruled inconclusive.
Without any hard evidence, police can't charge Isaac for the crime. While detectives look for more leads, Teresa's autopsy report arrives.
Based on the injury patterns, the attack was a surprise attack because we did not see a significant amount of defensive type injuries. And then she was pinned in a prone or face down position. I individually identified and labeled 47 separate stab wounds. This would have been a horrifying death for any individual.
As police review evidence, they follow up on the lead on the bloody man from the Department of Public Works.
They had a sketch made of this unknown person that stopped at the garage to wash up.
We put it out there. The individual didn't come forward. It was out in the press. It was in the newspaper. I did go back and re-interview the witnesses, but nothing came back of evidentiary value.
Police also continue interviewing Teresa's friends.
I always protected Terry. So when she was killed, I had no purpose anymore. And so I gave my all to whatever they needed. It was hours and hours and hours of interviews with the police, trying to give them everything that I knew about every person we had ever hung out with, for me to help them to hopefully find who did this.
One of the people detectives learn about is Jerry Kirkpatrick.
So Jerry Kirkpatrick was a delivery guy to Cousins where Teresa worked.
Friends say Jerry asked Teresa out numerous times.
I don't think she was looking to have a relationship with him. He was definitely interested in her.
That's the indication that we got, that he was pursuing her more than she was pursuing him.
Police learn about one encounter with Jerry that left Teresa unsettled.
I thought I saw Jerry before she died at the club, just watching us. And it gave me this feeling like, why is he here? Like, he shouldn't know we're here. Why is he standing off in the shadows? It was a very creepy feeling.
So the question is Jerry stalking her?
But then, Teresa's friends point out something else disturbing about Jerry.
They thought he might be similar to the picture of the person that was at the Department of Public Works. The drawing looked like him.
Officers immediately interview Jerry at his home. Jerry denies he is the man in the sketch. He claims he was at a bar with his stepbrother the night of Teresa's murder, then went home before midnight.
There was alibi information that was confirming of the statement. When he got home, he called for a pizza to be delivered, and that was confirmed subsequently with phone records. He let us look at his vehicle. We examined the interior or exterior. Nothing of evidentiary value was located in that examination.
Then, investigators make a startling discovery.
There were knives found at Jerry Kirkpatrick's residence.
A lot of times we'd ask people, do you have knives? And can we see those knives? Do you mind if we have them tested? A lot of times that's done for a reaction. So he presents 4 or 5 knives. He did let us look at them when we were at the house. We even submitted them to the crime lab to have it analyzed.
While investigators wait for results, Jerry's landlord delivers some alarming news.
What happens within the next few days is he talks to his landlord about breaking his lease.
Jerry Kirkpatrick decided to move out of town, and that's in the midst of being interviewed and the investigation. So right away, that raises our suspicion.
Was Jerry trying to give detectives the slip?
It is clearly a red flag, and we have to look at that behavior as being possibly flight behavior. So we want to find out.
While investigating Jerry Kirkpatrick for the brutal stabbing of 22-year-old Teresa Wesolowski, detectives learn from Jerry's landlord he's about to skip town.
The landlord knew the police were talking to Jerry. We were actually notified by the Milwaukee Police Department because the landlord had thought, hey, this is odd, and called them. He says he's going to move to Tennessee. One of the aspects you look at in a homicide, is there any flight behavior after the homicide? Well, breaking your lease and moving to Tennessee might be described as flight behavior. We did confirm that he put money on a place on that Friday after the homicide.
But when investigators get the lab results back on Jerry's knives, the case takes a frustrating turn.
Nothing came back of evidentiary value.
Somebody having a collection of knives is not that uncommon, especially in Wisconsin. And the quick move that he made is something strange, but, there's nothing we can do about it. If he wants to move, he can move.
Police have one more lead to follow. Jerry's resemblance to the bloody man at the Public Works building.
He fit that description. We actually did an in-person lineup with Jerry, and he was not picked out by the individuals that observed this person driving the truck.
That person was never identified and never located.
Without any hard evidence linking Jerry to the murder, police have to let him go. Weeks go by, and investigators worry the case will grow cold.
We're doing interviews. Some people we're re-interviewing, but as time moves on, the investigation is getting older and older and harder to solve.
As the weeks turn into months, investigators doggedly work the case.
Well, I technically could have retired about 5 years before I did. A lot of it is to bring justice for the victim, but also to bring some sort of resolution or closure for the family.
The police kept telling me that it was someone close to her because of the horrific nature of it. I alienated myself from people because I just didn't know who I could or couldn't trust.
Months turn into years, but Teresa's loved ones make sure she's not forgotten.
Once a year on the date of the murder, the families would come out and hold vigils. It was a way for the family to try to say that we're still fighting to resolve this case.
But we use it as a way of seeing who is showing up and maybe more importantly, who isn't showing up.
Nothing seems out of the ordinary until 2005, 6 years after the murder, when Teresa's family notices something unusual.
Her mom had called me and said, "Did you happen to go out and leave flowers for Terry?" And I said, "No, I didn't."
These arrangements showed up, and they checked around and didn't know who put them there. So that always leads you to believe, is there somebody out there that's feeling guilty about committing a homicide and leaving something on a gravesite?
We had a camera installed to see if maybe we could identify the next time somebody did something like that. But we didn't capture any image or anything.
For detectives, it's another dead end. But then, with the investigation on the brink of going cold, a new forensic technology turns this 6-year-old case red hot.
In 2005, I got a contact from the Wisconsin Crime Lab, and Patty said, "Hey, I want you to submit this list of items for us to analyze using a technique called YSTR DNA testing."
With YSTR DNA testing, it allows us to find a very small amount of Y chromosome male DNA and a very large amount of DNA from a female source. So it's like finding that single grain of salt in a large bag of sugar.
Early on, when we had the blood evidence on Teresa's hands tested, it all came back as her DNA. That's a problem because it's not giving us a lead. What happens if we strip away all the X chromosomes? If she's a female and that's all her blood, there should be nothing left.
The analyst retests the swabs of Teresa's hands for male DNA.
The first thing I did was look at the previously run DNA samples to see if there was any Y chromosome DNA present in those. All of a sudden, all the DNA types I developed on her hands are matching a known standard for male DNA. And it was incredible. I contacted Detective Yogers for samples of DNA from individuals known to be connected to the case.
And now we're going to go take DNA samples from all of our suspects. We took what was probably our 25 top suspects, nearest and dearest, ex-boyfriend, boyfriend, that type of thing. That first group was a 0.
Undeterred, investigators submit more samples.
We went back to the list and got a second group.
We were testing people that were ancillary people. We had DNA from officers at the crime scene that we used to eliminate.
I didn't think we were going to get an answer for this case.
Then, after over 40 samples, a breakthrough.
The testing came back and only one person matched the Y chromosome found mixed into the blood on Teresa's hand.
Detective Yokers called me and said, "You're not going to believe this. The last guy that I swabbed is the guy that has a positive match on that DNA."
After 7 years investigating the murder of Teresa Wesolowski, detectives have now matched DNA from the scene to one of their suspects.
I was beyond excited. I actually shouted, "Oh my God," at my desk. We had a match from the DNA on Teresa's hands to Mark Lebecki.
Right away, I'm like, "Who's that guy?"
Mark Lebecki is a co-worker of Teresa's. Mark Lebecki was one of the individuals that was interviewed by the officers. His statement was that he and Teresa were friendly at the factory.
So the murder occurs, and Mark Lebecki kept working there and was still working there.
Before they approach Mark, detectives need more than just the DNA evidence.
Now, the other heavy lifting starts because even the DNA evidence isn't going to stand on its own. So we need to bring all these other factors into play in building a case that's sufficient for the DA to charge.
First, detectives go back to the factory to dig deeper into Mark's background.
Some people said, "Oh, no, Mark Lebecki, he wouldn't kill anybody. He's just a puppy." He would show people pictures of little girls, and he said they were his daughters. "What do you think I should get them for Christmas or birthday, whatever?"
When detectives look closer, they discover Mark isn't all he claims to be.
Well, he was never married. He didn't have any kids. So this is just like weird. He had this like pretend life.
Mark Lebecki was pretty much a loner, lived with his parents in a mobile home in a rural area, apparently liked to watch television, play video games.
I think it was just a big fantasy with him, a big game to try to fit in.
What else had Mark been hiding?
We had one person that said that Mark had asked her what she thought he could do to better his chances with going out with Teresa. So he clearly had a focus on her.
Detectives revisit evidence from the crime scene, starting with the bloody boot prints.
The problem with identifying somebody with a common shoe is there's so many of them. There could be millions of those shoes made. I contact a person in Scottsdale, Arizona, the detective in their forensic unit, and he had the foremost outsold databases that existed. And he said, that is a Texas steer outsole. Early in the investigation, we had information about the employees being supplied shoes or they could purchase shoes from a store.
When police search factory records, they make a crucial discovery.
And we determined that Mark Lebecki had submitted a receipt for a Texas steer shoe.
Next, investigators turn to the tire tracks left at the scene.
So we took 56 people out of our investigation and identified the vehicles that were registered to them at the time of the homicide. 5 individuals had vehicles that were able to make that mark at the scene. One of them was Mark Lebecki.
With the evidence piling up, detectives ask Mark to come down to the police department for an interview.
He was quiet. He answered the questions. He was confident, I would say.
That confidence doesn't last long.
When he finds out that his DNA is on her hands, he then starts to try and explain why they are there. What started out as I just talked to her at the door is I didn't talk to her then, I talked to her at a break, and we may have hugged.
Detectives confront Mark with the evidence.
I told him the car, wheel track matches. Your DNA is found on her hands, and a boot that you wear is in the blood footwear impression on the road. So, we're looking at you. You need to start explaining some of this stuff.
Now, it's Mark's turn to drop a bombshell on police.
He said, I don't want to get anyone else in trouble. I don't want to be a snitch. Then he mentioned this guy named Tom Thompson.
Tom Thompson worked at the factory with Mark and Teresa.
At the time of the homicide, the officers that went up and did the canvass at the factory did speak with Tom Thompson. His statement to them was that he knew Teresa. He wasn't necessarily friends with Teresa. They never dated, anything like that.
Mark tells them what happened the night of the murder.
Mark said he stopped on the side of the road to buy some cocaine from Thompson.
He said that when he got up there was a vehicle already parked in front where he parked, and Tom Thompson walked up to his vehicle.
So Thompson goes in, sits in the back seat. Mark said, I am doing the cocaine in the front of the seat.
According to him, Teresa gets in the back seat and gets in an argument with Tom, and he proceeds to stab her. Mark says he only hears thumping and movement in the back seat.
Now it's time to start poking holes in the story. She cannot be stabbed 40-some times in the back seat of someone's car and they not know what's going on. The whole interior would have been covered in blood. So that's out right there.
Mark says Teresa flops out of there onto the ground. Tom Thompson continues to stab her and drags her to that location alongside the vehicle.
According to Mark, Thompson then turned on him.
Tom Thompson tell him, you keep your mouth shut, and then he let him go. So he kept his mouth shut. He didn't go to the police.
4 years later, Tom Thompson dies, but Mark keeps silent for another 3 years.
He's trying to explain how he's involved in this homicide, and the easiest thing to do is to blame it on the dead guy.
Detectives re-interview workers at the factory about Tom Thompson.
Everybody to a person said he was a health nut.
We have found no indication that he was dealing cocaine or using cocaine.
Investigators asked Teresa's friends if she used drugs.
Terry wanted nothing to do with cocaine. Nothing.
So she wouldn't have gone there to buy drugs from Tom Thompson. What was her reason for being there?
There's one last piece of evidence to examine. The car that Mark drove at the time of the murder.
We wanted that vehicle. We found it by another owner, and we ended up buying it from that guy. We brought it down to the lab and examined it for blood, hair, whatever evidence that we could. That rear seat was taken apart. It was a perforated leather, so there were holes in it. So the blood went down through the holes in that leather, and then they soaked into the foam rubber of that seat.
Does the blood belong to Teresa? It's sent to the lab for analysis.
I was very excited to call Mike Yogers and let him know I had found a possible...
10 years after 22-year-old Teresa Wesolowski is stabbed to death, detectives are waiting to see if blood found in the back of coworker Mark Lebecki's car belongs to her.
Those DNA profiles matched the DNA profile from Teresa Wesolowski.
Oh, it was significant. It was an important moment.
But what about Mark's claim that coworker Tom Thompson killed Teresa?
At this stage, and 7 years after the murder, Lebecki is implicating a man who had died 3 years earlier. But it was only Lebecki's DNA that was ever found on Teresa's body. They find blood in a cushion of a seat in Lebecki's car. They find that that's Teresa's DNA. They have his DNA, her DNA, and at that point, the case was made.
That was the final thing that district attorney needed to issue the charge. We really felt that we had turned the corner on this case.
Detective Yogers called me and he said, I just want to let you know that we are going to make an arrest. And I was so excited. I was waiting, just waiting for the news.
Detectives go to the box factory where Mark works.
We watched for him to come out of the building, and Kim and I walked up to him and told him he was under arrest. I was excited. It was a good day.
Mark denies killing Teresa, so investigators are left to piece together what really happened that night.
I think Mark Lebecki was a very lonely person that probably imagined a relationship with Teresa and decided she was the one. She was just being nice to people. And he probably read that for more than it was.
I think for Terry, it was more that this guy was telling him his problems at work, and she was a listener. She would listen. He wore on her heartstrings and her niceness as a person.
Then, on May 28th, 1999, Mark made his move.
I think that she was coming out of the building, and Mark, for whatever reason, convinced her to meet him. They meet at the back of the vehicle.
I think that he probably did ask her to come back to his place for the night. And when she said no, he just went on a rampage and just started stabbing her. He stabbed her multiple times on that road. Then he dragged her over to that grass. He stabbed her some more. There's blood flying up on her car. He was a monster that night.
We can only guess at it because he's not talking. We don't have to prove why he did this. We just have to prove that he did.
After the vicious stabbing, Mark returned to his normal routine.
Mark Lebecki continues to work at the factory. He doesn't make any erratic move like moving away or changing jobs. He just sort of carries on with life as he did before the murder. He had no criminal record. Mark Lebecki certainly did not emerge as a likely suspect at all. It was shocking to hear that Mark Lebecki had killed Teresa.
It was almost surreal. It got me because it wasn't anyone I knew.
At trial, Mark Lebecki enters a plea of not guilty and sticks to his story that Tom Thompson killed Teresa.
Clearly, his incentive was to try and show somebody else did it back there. But that doesn't hold up.
I don't think the jury bought that at all.
Mark is convicted of first-degree murder, and in November 2010, he is sentenced to 30 years in prison with no chance of parole.
Mark Lebecki did not admit guilt. The judge noted that Lebecki never expressed any remorse.
In his mind, he's still not guilty. And the judge even said to him, I hope that someday you will admit to yourself that you've done this, because you have done this.
The journey was long and tedious. It will never replace Teresa for the family. She was a good kid. She was moving forward with her life. She probably would have maybe...
It was just supposed to be a fun night out, adults only.
What's the overall view of this young mom who suddenly goes missing?
People liked Karen, they liked being around her.
Tonight, the shocking trial and the ex-wife you'll only see on 2020.
This is a man I was married to that I shouldn't have been afraid of.
But what about his first wife?
My mom was going out more, which made me start to question why.
When they found Karen's vehicle, it had a badly damaged flat tire.
It appears that this screw was mainly inserted into the tire.
It was literally screwed into the tire. So this is where you found the smashed cell phones?
In this area here.
Not one, but two smashed phones.
I thought maybe somebody saw her walking and grabbed her.
She doesn't hold back. I can see Karen going over there and letting him have it.
This case is wild, to put it mildly. It's wild because the circumstances are just so unique.
Karen Swift's Halloween costume was a very sexy black costume.
Black skirt, black tights, black shoes, and she had a black, kind of a Mardi Gras type mask that she was wearing.
I think she was supposed to be a cat. She had a skirt on. It was very form-fitting.
So it was va-va-voom.
It was.
What began as an innocent night of Halloween partying was just the beginning of a tragic story that would engulf not only Karen Swift, but her whole family and almost everyone in this close-knit community.
There was going to be a costume party on October 29th, 2011. It was held at a place that here in Dyersburg it's called The Farms. It's a country club that's attached to the golf course.
Dyersburg, Tennessee is just a small hamlet in western Tennessee. It's not far from the Mississippi River.
Dyersburg is a small, very closely knit town. Everybody pretty much knows everybody.
I think the majority of the population still has that old Southern hospitality, kind of greet everybody, wave. If you know somebody when you're driving down the road, you wave to them.
There's only 38,000 people here. Most people have grown up here, lived here their whole lives.
And I think that you take the word of mouth and you add the social media aspect to it now, and everyone is almost always in everyone else's business.
44-year-old Karen Swift marries husband David in 1989. Originally from Arkansas, they moved to Dyersburg, Tennessee with their family about 2 decades later in 2008.
When I first moved to Tennessee, I really liked it. I enjoyed it. It was very peaceful, and getting to know all my new friends and, meet new people was fun.
They didn't know anyone in Dyer County, and they made the move here, apparently for the schools. There are some good schools in this area.
Together, David and Karen Swift had 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 younger girls, including their daughter Ashley.
Growing up, my mom was very involved. She loved taking us to sports, dance, cheer. She just had that very caring and nurturing personality.
She was just a wonderful mother. She would do anything for her children. They were number one in her life. They came before anything else.
Karen was always kind of a fun-loving, bubbly type personality. Tried to, even when things were not going particularly well, tried to keep a positive attitude.
Her friends really liked her, and she had a lot of friends. So she was someone who was beautiful, someone who appeared to be happy with her life, and things appeared to be going very well for her.
Karen was outgoing, gregarious. She made friends very easily. People liked Karen. They liked being around her.
And on this cool, clear October night, Karen was headed out with her friends, while her daughter Ashley, who was 9 at the time, was heading to a sleepover at her friend's house.
I remember I was staying at a friend's house, and my mom was going to a Halloween party with some of her friends, and my dad was going to stay home with my sister.
Karen Swift went to the Halloween party with Bill Bona and Kathy Bona.
The party was hosted by 15 to 20 different couples. The women kind of did all the decorations, put everything together. The guys just kind of showed up.
And it was just supposed to be a fun night out. Adults only, dress up, have fun in a costume, and just socialize with one another. Karen arrived at the Halloween party probably around 8 or a little after 8 p.m.
That night, Karen was in a pretty good mood. I mean, she was able to go out on the dance floor and talk to different people. People were drinking, having a good time. Music was playing. People were out dancing. Karen was walking around, talking to several people. I remember seeing her on the dance floor at least one time.
And she left with Bill and Kathy Bona probably around midnight that night. And they went to McDonald's to get some French fries.
So they went through the McDonald's drive-thru and then went home to Kathy and Bill Bona's house.
While they're at Bill and Kathy's house, she gets a call from her daughter, Ashley.
When we were starting to go to bed, I decided that I wanted to go home. I called my mom and asked her to come get me.
Karen immediately told Kathy, I've got to go, my baby's sick, I'm going to go pick her up. So she did. She left, she went and picked up her daughter at a friend's house and then went home.
By now, of course, it's around 1:30 in the morning the next day, October 30th. On her way home, Karen texts her husband, David, to let him know she's heading back to their house.
When she told him about going to pick up Ashley, he sent her a text response about the garage door is closed, come in the side door.
And then they arrived back at the Swift home around 2 a.m. that morning.
Karen goes to sleep downstairs while her husband David is sleeping in a different bedroom upstairs.
David did not get up until the next morning around 10 or 10:30 when the girls woke him up.
It's now that the Swift family's entire world turns upside down.
The next morning, Karen was not at home. The girls were the first ones, according to David, to tell him that their mother was missing.
Remember, Karen and Ashley had returned home around 2 in the morning and went to sleep. But now it seems that sometime after that, Karen had somehow disappeared.
Between the time of probably 10 and 11 o'clock, Kathy Bono, her friend, had been trying to call her. David Swift, her husband, had been trying to call her. And so now people are starting to get seriously worried that something's happened to her.
After Bill and Kathy Bono didn't get a response from her, they kind of said, well, something's not right. So they called David and asked him, where is Karen? And then they called the sheriff's office and said that she was missing.
Shortly after that, David made a phone call to the sheriff's department and reported that his wife was missing.
Karen's disappearance quickly became a mystery, and it would begin with the discovery of her abandoned car, a key piece of evidence that transforms this from a missing persons case into something far more sinister. So she shows up missing.
There was a lot of different theories about what was going on. There were many clouds of suspicion. This beautiful blonde-headed lady, mother of 4, comes up missing after a Halloween party. Everybody was talking about it.
The morning of Karen's disappearance, her car is discovered less than a half-mile away from her home.
At the corner of Millsfield Highway and Harness in Dyer County is where the broken-down SUV of 44-year-old Karen Swift was found.
I saw the car sit there for a day or so.
Karen's gone, and that's what's important, and we just want her to come back.
You could walk to it. It wasn't that far away on the highway, and it was there with a flat tire. So that's a clue. Her car's there.
Karen's vehicle was on the side of the road on Millsfield Highway right next to Harness Road. That's the road that Karen had lived on. Karen was not there.
It was in a normal state. It was parked on the side of the road. It had a flat tire to the right side. The investigation revealed that it was a screw in the tire.
Why would her car be up there? If she had come home, there was no one who said Karen walked home from up on the highway, so it would appear that Karen had left. But it wasn't very far for her to suddenly get a flat tire either.
Investigators believe that the tire had been manually deflated and that the screw had been intentionally inserted into the tire. Which begs the question, did somebody put it there on purpose to leave Karen stranded?
When we observed the car, we noticed a screw in the tire. If you look at this very closely, it appears that this screw was manually inserted into the tire.
It was literally screwed into the tire.
Literally screwed into the tire. And my theory was right once we sent it off for forensic analysis. It was manually placed in that tire.
And I wanted you to look at, show me this screw. This is one that you actually ran over.
This is the screw I actually ran over in my patrol unit that went all the way up in the tire. And you can see where it was on the road.
Yeah. A lot of friction.
A lot of friction. This screw has no friction.
The lack of friction making investigators believe the screw hadn't been driven on. But how could that be?
They had not been in Dyer County that long because they had moved there. Karen's from Pocahontas, Arkansas, which is about 2 hours from Dyersburg. And it was about 4 years later that she disappeared.
The Swifts seemed to have a great life in Pocahontas. They were young and in love and devoted parents, as their friend Holly Sutton tells us.
We met through just public school and ended up being fast friends. They were excellent parents. They had rules. They were fairly strict. They did everything with their children.
We moved ultimately for my dad's job to Tennessee. It was just a better opportunity. I enjoyed it. It was very peaceful. I do think she was happy. I think that she wasn't necessarily fully herself in Tennessee.
Karen wasn't acting like herself, and turns out there was a reason for it. Strains on their marriage, David's new job as a manager at a manufacturing plant, and Karen's apparent change in lifestyle in Dyersburg worried those closest to her.
She had just mentioned to me that it was very different. She just said that, she says, I don't know that you would like it here. But she did say that she was meeting people and getting out.
I was used to her tucking me into bed every night or being home every night, getting up with her and going to the gym, and that kind of slowly stopped the longer that we lived in Tennessee.
That was not their lifestyle in Pocahontas. They didn't even social drink. We didn't need that. It was hard to hear because that was not them.
As soon as she went missing, it was Chief McCright's supposition that David, at the very least, had something to do with it.
And we finally just decided that, hey, he's going to be the only person that can really help us in this case to tell us about where his wife might have gone.
If you have a seat for me right over there.
He came in and gave my guys an interview. That interview didn't go very well, we didn't think.
And I said, so are you going to a costume party, or what are you doing? Are you all having a party? And she said, no, I'm just going to Kathy's. I said, well, okay.
He really wasn't concerned to me about where she might have gone.
Okay, was there any kind of argument or anything then?
No, I just, it was very brief. I wanted to make sure that Ashley was okay and that she was okay, because I questioned Karen about driving and getting her. I said, you know, if you can't drive, I will get Ashley. And that was all the conversation was.
Okay. How close did you get to her? Could you tell whether she'd been drinking or not?
Oh, yeah, you could tell. I could always smell she was drinking, you know.
He was saying, like, you know, that she drank and she was pretty much an alcoholic.
We're both drunk and been drinking, and she was so drunk once that she was had passed out. He was just so drunk that Sharon was drinking so much that...
So that was just, you know, I should, as a husband, be concerned about where is my wife.
If you had to use an estimated guess right now, where do you think she is?
I don't know. I'm so worried about her.
I would say my dad's reaction was, he was obviously very worried, but you have to think I was 9 and my sister was 5, so I think he was trying to put on a very brave face for us.
As the search for Karen Swift continues, investigators are reminded of a horrible incident Karen had with a neighbor just months before.
There was an issue where John Hogshooter had poisoned a couple of dogs in the neighborhood. One of the dogs belonged to David and Karen Swift.
Anybody who has a dog and they say their neighbor poisoned their dog, that would certainly be bad blood.
She doesn't hold back. If she feels that she's got something to say, she's going to say it.
A suspect emerges for investigators. As the search for Karen Swift continues, investigators cast a wide net for suspects and leads.
There was a man that she had met at a concert about 20 miles from Dyersburg across the Mississippi River.
It never grew into a full romantic relationship. It was more of an acquaintance. I think they talked on the phone a few times, maybe sent text messages back a few times, but it never developed any further than that.
His last text to Karen was, she told him that she was at the Halloween party, hanging out with some friends. And his last text was something essentially, great, text me sometime, I'd love to take you out to dinner. And we quickly concluded that, you know, obviously it didn't sound like somebody who was obsessed, and he was ruled out as a suspect.
Found out where he was at the time of her disappearance, and that alibi checked out.
But investigators have another possible lead to follow as they learn of a terrible conflict between Karen Swift and one of her neighbors.
John Hogshooter lived across the road, diagonal from their residence.
Catty-cornered, probably not more than 150 feet from their home.
Mr. Hogshooter had previously had a criminal matter charged against him regarding some sort of issue with one of their dogs.
He had gained some notoriety in the neighborhood. He's kind of a rough around the edges fella, generally.
There was an issue where John Hogshooter had poisoned a couple of dogs in the neighborhood, and one of the dogs belonged to David and Karen Swift.
He put some poison, some sort of poison concoction out on his property. One of the Swift's dogs got into the poison and was also sickened. The Swift's dogs did not die.
On October 7th, Karen actually went to this man's house to confront him about her dog being poisoned. John was eventually charged with animal cruelty in that case, and he actually pleaded guilty.
While one neighborhood dog did die from the poisoning, the Swift dog managed to survive after being rushed to the vet and having its stomach pumped, the incident creating bad blood between the neighbors.
Anybody owns a dog and they say their neighbor poisoned their dog, that would certainly be bad blood.
I know Karen and the hog shooter guy, I knew of the fight they'd had.
She doesn't hold back. She doesn't hold back. Like, if she feels that she's got something to say, she's going to say it.
When she was missing, he became one of the first suspects that the sheriff's department looked at.
Investigators want to talk to John Hogshooter. He'd been poisoning neighborhood dogs, including Karen's. They bring him into this interrogation room, and they have some questions to ask.
General, what I want to talk to you about, I'm going to just shoot straight from the hip. Are you aware of what's going on out there where you live?
Yeah, I'm well aware of what's going on out there.
What I'm trying to do is clear people. And I know that the incident that happened with the dogs out there, I know all, about that because of the prior investigator that had been working that case. What I'm trying to do is find out your whereabouts on the 30th from that Saturday.
We interviewed John and asked him that he, of course, we interviewed about the dogs, but we wanted to know, did he know Karen?
His memories of Karen Swift differs from what others have said about the tension between the two of them.
What we want to do is make sure you had no involvement in Karen's disappearance.
I don't know. The only way I even seen a picture of this lady is my wife showed me a picture of her. I was like, oh, is that what she looks like? The only other time I've ever seen her is out mowing her grass in the summertime from my house.
Had he ever had any contact with Karen? Had he spoken with her? What kind of involvement had he ever had with Karen or David or anybody else in that neighborhood?
I go up there and talk to him and sit out on the porch. From that area, from my house or his house, is the only time I've ever seen that lady. Out there mowing the yard. If she's in a bikini, what do you think? Everybody's going to be...
Like, right, I understand.
We're men,
You're a man, you're going to look at her, ain't you?
Yeah, but, just like, yeah, she's in a bikini up there, and that's it. And that's the only time I've ever seen her.
And he said no, he just saw her at one time out in the yard, and, like a neighbor waved or something to the nature of that.
When did you find out that this woman was missing? When did you know about it?
I would say probably somewhere in the middle of the week.
This past week?
Yeah, or whenever she came up missing, probably the middle of the week.
Somebody tell you, or you see it on the news, or?
How did I find out? Maybe it might. Well, I don't have TV, so I don't watch TV, so I don't know how I found out. My wife may have told me, or I don't remember. I think it's because I honestly don't know.
As soon as they started talking to him, he was extremely cooperative.
Where is my truck?
It's locked up and impounded in an enclosed building.
They impounded his vehicle. They got a search warrant, searched his house.
What I'm trying to say, if we want to look at your house, I'd rather for you not to go home before we got there. That's what I'm saying.
Well, my clothes and stuff, I wash my clothes over at my daughter's house, so all my clothes, I'll probably go over there and take a shower and get my clothes for sure. I can't even get in because my keys in the truck. There's a gold key in where the ashtray thing goes right there. There's a gold key. That's the only way I can get in and get my clothes to.
Okay.
He's very relaxed. He wasn't tense about it. It was obvious that, he wasn't nervous. I thought it was a good interview.
There was no evidence in the end that pointed that John Hogshooter had any knowledge of this at all.
But then investigators find Karen Swift's 2 cell phones, almost totally destroyed, near the property of John Hogshooter.
Finding these 2 phones very close to John's property was very concerning for the police.
When we discovered the phones, they were damaged. They were crushed. Somebody might have stomped them and then pitched them there.
They know she's missing. Her phone was not in her car. They didn't see it around the car, so they start searching for the phone.
So we decided we were going to do a grid from where her car was found back to the house.
So this is where you found the smashed cell phones?
In this area here, the phones were found.
Yeah.
They found 580-something feet from their driveway, from Karen's driveway to this location.
A highway patrolman comes across not one, but 2 smashed phones.
This is images of them, right? They were shattered.
That phone was shattered before it even went there. Because if you had thrown it in that grass, you would never got this damage to this phone.
But as close to the Swifts' home as the phones are, they're also very close to John Hogshuter's home. That neighbor, the Swifts say they had a confrontation with.
Finding those 2 phones within proximity of John Hogshuter's house raises many, many questions for investigators in this case, for obvious reasons.
Investigators found out that Hogshuter was at this church event.
We knew where he was on her day of disappearance, and we were able to establish his alibi.
There was no evidence in the end that pointed that John Hogshuter had any knowledge of this at all.
A thorough investigation was done, and he had alibi witnesses, and we were able to pretty quickly eliminate him as a suspect.
With Hogshuter cleared, the investigation continues. At this point, the most important unanswered question, where is Karen?
Some people just walk away from their lives. It happens all the time. Without a body, they don't know that a crime's been committed.
We constantly relied on getting them to the media. Of course, the sheriff would make press releases, social media. Everybody knew that we were trying to locate her.
There's a landmark in Dyer County, and it's a large cross where you can see it from a good distance. And near that, within a few hundred feet, is a cemetery.
Bledsoe Cemetery is very spread out. Some of the headstones there are over 100 years old, and even older. It's a very rural area. A local pastor and a congregant were in Bledsoe Cemetery on December 10th examining overturned headstones. And as they're surveying this type of damage, they notice a human body part coming out of some kudzu bushes.
Karen Swift has been missing for 6 weeks at this point. The police arrive and head to this nearby area full of kudzu.
Kudzu, they're vines. And kudzu can cover everything. It can cover very large trees and hang down. Kudzu can cover everything that it crawls across, and it crawls across almost everything.
And this is the kudzu that was...
This is the kudzu area. And all of this was in kudzu. Every bit of this was in kudzu.
So it was hiding everything here?
Yes, and the body was found somewhere in this area, maybe near that tree stump.
The body was so badly decomposed, it was hard to tell how long it had been there. One thing was very clear, though. There was almost no way that this person just wandered off and somehow found themselves underneath these bushes and then somehow died.
They certainly have an indication that it's a female, but they're not positive that it's Karen Swift.
The body was found with just undergarments on.
Yes.
What does that tell you?
Well, it lets me know that she did not leave the house dressed like that.
The body is sent to the medical examiner, and dental records make the identification official. It is indeed Karen Swift.
We went to the home to make the death notification. And we told David that we had found Karen. And his very words were, "You found it." You know, and we all, like, We found your wife, Karen. You found it.
I don't have any audio or statement that backs that up, but I don't know that that statement proves anything. I know that the officer was trying to make something of that, but it's, in my opinion, not an admission or anything other than you found it.
The 44-year-old's body was found near Bledsoe Cemetery, just 2 miles from her Dyer County home. Police identified Swift's body Sunday using dental records. They're not saying how she was murdered. No suspects have been named.
Maybe it was just my dad who sat me down and told me that they found my mom, but I remember my dad being kind of very calm. He explained it in a way of mom's not coming back home and this is a new reality. And I think that he was trying to say it in the best way possible, but there's not really a best way possible to say that.
It was one of those days where you just go numb and you just cannot believe that this is what it came to and why.
I was very upset when her body was found because of the kids and also David. And he was wondering what in the world could have happened.
I thought maybe, maybe somebody saw her walking and, grabbed her or things like that. But the more I thought about it, I thought there had to be a little bit more to it.
The autopsy revealed that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. One thing that we were not able to tell was whether there was strangulation involved.
Investigators may not be certain how, but they are now convinced Karen Swift was murdered. As they try to figure out who did it, what did they find under a spare tire? As investigators in Dyersburg look into what is now a murder case, they learn some messy details about Karen and David Swift's marriage. Remember, they had moved here to Tennessee from Pocahontas, Arkansas.
Karen and David met in Pocahontas. They got married in 1989. Karen and David had what could be best described as a tumultuous marriage.
I know that maybe there was some affairs going on in Arkansas.
He ended up having a marital affair with this lady, and a child was born as a result of that affair. And they divorced at that time.
For a lot of couples, that might have been the end. But David and Karen are able to reconcile. They're divorced for only about 7 months when they remarry in 2000 and continue raising their 2 sons together.
And so then David and Karen go on and have their daughters Ashley and Cayley. Now, sometime in the mid-2000s, Karen has an affair. David finds out. He forgives her for this. They reportedly move on.
He decided to quickly move the family to Dyersburg.
So it's David and Karen living in the new house with 3 of their 4 younger children. The oldest son was now in college.
He felt like if they didn't get away from the problem that we're having in Arkansas, their marriage would never work. And it did, I mean, they had alone for quite some time, and then things went from bad to worse.
That's because once the couple moves from Arkansas to Tennessee, more problems spring up. Karen makes new friends, and David and Karen have very different views about what happened next.
It didn't seem like David was happy with those friends, and they weren't especially happy with David either.
It was clear that once she started this friendship with these new friends, that she was moving away from David.
It was midnight. I heard her sneaking out of the house.
He talked about it in that police interview.
I've seen nights that she would speed down the drive and Ashley's chasing after her and stuff, not wanting her to leave and go out at night.
It did get to a point where I feel like there was a little bit of shift in my family, and my mom was going out more, which made me start to question why.
As investigators learn details about what was going on, questions are raised about the nature of David's behavior towards Karen and if his alleged behavior crossed a line.
When David got upset is when Karen would be absent from the house.
He wanted to know where she was.
He would wake up, she would be gone, and he would get out to see where she was at.
David might be following her, but to him, it made perfect sense. He told people he had reason to worry about her and their kids. And his attorney says he thought she might be cheating on him.
If it's late at night and your kids are in bed and you're home after a work day, you know, you might understand why somebody would say, hey, what's going on? Or can I ask you some questions?
I think David just wanted his wife to be at home where she should be with him and the kids. She claimed it was controlling. I don't think so.
But Karen let it be known she had had enough. She wanted another divorce.
Karen wanted to file for divorce because she felt David was too controlling of her.
Frankly, if we had to go to court, the inappropriate marital conduct would have been what I would refer to as kind of a stalkish behavior.
But Karen doesn't have enough money of her own to file for divorce, so her good friends, Bill and Kathy Bona, loan her the cash. Not only that, the Bonas say they gave Karen a second phone to use to get around her husband, to talk to her divorce lawyer.
Karen told me that she had a secondary phone, that the number that she was talking to me on was a secondary phone, and she did not want him to know that she was calling and talking to me about a potential divorce.
Investigators understand why they found those two smashed and discarded phones.
She was afraid to be present when he was served. It was a substantial amount of money that she was asking for, so I think that had a big impact on David when he received that.
And in the meantime, the couple continues to live together in the same house.
She was living downstairs, and David was sleeping upstairs.
I didn't notice anything different, you know. We all went about our business.
She chose to live in the home. And my take on it was that she wasn't afraid of him. She didn't ask for order of protection because there had been no issues of physical violence.
David continued to say things to Karen, wanting to call the divorce off.
He wasn't happy about the divorce.
To prosecutors, the possible divorce and the issues in the marriage are reaching a boiling point.
I believe that he had the attitude they had reconciled before or had problems before, and perhaps they could just talk through it and continue on with their life.
And he said she wasn't having it. He said there was just no way.
Was it enough of a motive for murder? Investigators had some evidence, including those smashed cell phones found here. And there were those divorce papers that David seemed to have hidden under the spare tire in his car.
This here is not adding up, because if I'm getting a divorce, why do I need to hide them in a car, in the trunk, under a spare tire?
I don't have an explanation if he had just stuck them there or if he had inadvertently set them there.
It was only 20 days after she filed for divorce that Karen went missing.
To investigators, it's a lot of smoke. But the truth is, there is simply no hard evidence linking David Swift to the crime. And the district attorney general in office at the time is not willing to charge him.
I think he was concerned that you only get one chance to try the case.
For more than a decade, the town wonders, is there a killer walking free? Then in 2022, finally, an arrest. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. And I got a chance to talk to that man from behind bars. Did you ever feel like you had a cloud of suspicion over you? Am I talking with the killer? And another woman emerges with a harrowing account. How would what she says affect the Karen Swift case?
The night that Karen was last seen, she went to a Halloween party.
I mean, the body was here for a month.
Undetected.
They investigated and they investigated, and everyone was like, when are you going to find a suspect?
The story of the same man, but two different women. One of them killed, one of them claiming she was stalked.
And there he was, in my backyard, in the middle of the night. This is too much.
The exclusive interview you'll only see on 2020.
They told me that my dad got arrested, and in that moment I was like, for what?
How big a deal was this trial in Dyersburg?
This trial was huge.
They didn't compare the fingerprints. They had tunnel vision.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
This is a man I was married to that I shouldn't have been afraid of. And why is this happening?
Today we've intensified our search. We have combed through the areas again.
Karen Swift is a 44-year-old housewife, mother of 4, in Dyersburg, Tennessee, and she disappears in October 2011. Her car turns up not far from her house.
Car was locked, secure. There was no signs of foul play in the vehicle.
It was puzzling. I really didn't know. I didn't know what to think.
So after Karen goes missing, the police talk to her husband, David.
I just ordered to come home.
And they learn that there are serious problems in the Swift marriage.
Well, have you filed for divorce?
She filed on the 5th.
6 weeks after she disappears.
The body was found somewhere in this area, maybe near that tree stump.
Karen Swift has been found. Police identified Swift's body using dental records.
For the Dyer County Sheriff's Office, this case turns into a murder investigation. But they don't have enough evidence against Karen Swift's husband, David, or anyone else for that matter, to make an arrest. For more than a decade, there seems to be a question that lingers in the air in this town. Will Karen Swift ever get justice?
When it didn't happen right away, it almost felt like that there was nobody trying.
Somebody did this, so who? I'm 100% sure David did not do this.
And we kept working this case. We never gave up on it. And there was always little bits and pieces that we could piece and put together.
David, anytime law enforcement or the DA's office reached out to him, he answered their questions. He cooperated because he wanted to find out what happened to his wife.
They investigated and they investigated, and everyone was like, when are you going to find a suspect? When are you going to charge someone?
So for 10 years, 11 years, it was the hot topic in town.
It became an election year issue about no swift justice.
And a lot of people were upset about Karen's case not being solved. It was always the number one thing that came up.
And in 2018, promising to look at the case again, Danny Goodman is elected as the new District Attorney General. Later, the sheriff hands the entire case file over to him.
And we, of course, had a regular caseload. It wasn't something that we could just drop our normal caseload and start going through.
By then, David Swift has left town. He has a whole new life and a new wife, Kelly Essman.
Single Christians, good news. At ChristianMingle.com.
I met David on Christian Mingle in January of 2014, and we dated for about 2.5 years, and then he moved to Alabama when we got married.
My relationship with my dad during this time period was very good. He made sure that we still had as normal as a childhood as we could, even into our teenage years, you know.
He did start telling me a little bit about Karen and the fact that she had come up missing. He actually asked me to run a background check on him, and the background check comes up clean. You know, none of the news stories showed that he was a person of interest. They didn't say that he was a suspect. It was okay.
I think they had a wonderful relationship. Everybody got along.
It may have started out that way, but Kelly says cracks started to form in the marriage over parenting issues. And she says David never wanted to discuss her concerns. Over the years, she says it grew worse and worse.
There were challenges, and with all blended families, there are, you know. And that's where it started going downhill. We both went to therapy. So I finally just decided, I can't go back. This is too much. He finally said that he would file for divorce.
But they have no idea that back in Dyersburg, there's been a break in the Karen Swift investigation, thanks to something completely unrelated, the COVID pandemic.
It was actually good for this case because at that time we were not allowed to have in-person court. We were not allowed to have jury trials, so we had a lot of time that was just downtime in the office.
We were alone in the office for, I want to say it was around 6 weeks. Looked at every page that was compiled by the Sheriff's Department.
And that's how the case basically was rejuvenated, and we started back with a lot more detail looking into it.
We just basically came to the same conclusion that, yes, David Swift did it.
We noticed maybe that there were a few things that we would like to have to prosecute the case that were not there.
In particular, they say they want information stored on Karen Swift's cell phones, found smashed not far from her home. After a year of trying, experts can't recover that data, but prosecutors say they do come up with more digital evidence from David Swift's computer.
In the days and weeks after Karen vanished, they found that her husband had been visiting all of these multiple dating sites. Why is David looking at dating sites when she hasn't even been found?
David Swift's lawyer claims other people in the house may have been using that computer and accessing those sites. The prosecutors decide they have enough to take the case to a grand jury. David Swift is indicted.
We would never take a case to trial that we did not feel like we could be successful with prosecution. And at that point, we felt that we could.
An arrest has finally been made in the 2011 murder of Karen Swift.
David Swift was arrested today in Alabama, where he was living with his new wife.
David Swift is charged with premeditated first-degree murder.
He was shocked.
Swift is brought back to Tennessee, where he later pleads not guilty to first and second-degree murder and manslaughter. The sheriff posts on Facebook, "Today is a good day for law enforcement." David was always a suspect because all the evidence points to him.
Certainly it wasn't enough evidence to take him into custody and bring it to trial.
Every rumor, every piece of information that came in, we followed up. No one else had a motive. No one else had the opportunity, and he had all of those things.
They told me that my dad got arrested, and in that moment I was like, for what?
What could they possibly have that they arrested him for? Something that happened so long ago.
I think they just wanted to make an arrest to say we got somebody because they were getting so much flack from people.
There was nothing groundbreaking, no scientific evidence or anything other than what was in the file. Now, I'm not saying that Danny Goodman or his office did anything unethical or improper, but sometimes when pressure is applied or pressure is present in a situation, decisions get made, and we just disagreed with his decision to charge David Swift.
I remember getting that first phone call from him after he was in the jail, and I remember his first words weren't, you know, they weren't about him, they were about us, and that everything was going to be okay.
I spoke to David Swift in a jailhouse interview. David, because this is the moment to clear the record, did you kill your wife?
No, absolutely not. She wasn't afraid of me one bit. We never had no domestics, no violence.
Because of the pending criminal charges, Swift says he couldn't talk about the details of the case, but he denied any violence in the marriage. So you said no domestics, meaning you never hurt Karen?
Never.
Never raised a hand to her?
And on no female, ever. And I sure wouldn't do it to my wife or the mother of my children. But, you know, I loved her. And I still love, you know, her today.
But before he goes on trial, accused of killing Karen, a truly shocking development. New details emerge about David Swift's alleged behavior. Weeks after David Swift is arrested and charged with his wife Karen's murder, he's released after posting a $200,000 bond. But in a truly wild turn of events, Swift's legal troubles follow him home to Alabama, where he faces accusations of stalking, this time from his estranged second wife, Cayley Essman.
I was not afraid of David during the marriage. Towards the end of my marriage, I was not necessarily afraid of him. After I separated, there were periods of time when he would call me, asking me, where are you going? I would tell him Hobby Lobby or, just a Target or whatever. And he always seemed to be calling exactly when I would be going to that place.
After David's arrest, Cayley claims she found proof that she was being followed and filed for an emergency restraining order.
Cayley alleges that in the midst of all of this turmoil with David, that she came into some information that he actually had purchased a tracking device.
And right then I knew. That's how he knew where I was going. So I knew there's a tracking device somewhere on my car. And we did find the tracking device.
Cayley also claims in her motion that David started reaching out to her, sending repeated messages via text and email.
I repeatedly asked him to stop. It started with us trying to work out the details of the divorce, but it turned into a lot of random harassing emails on various topics.
Cayley files for that emergency restraining order, reporting that she was afraid for her safety, that she believed she may be in danger, and that David's stalking and harassment had become egregious. The judge made no findings on those claims, but the restraining order was granted.
I wanted him to leave me alone. That's all I wanted, just leave me alone.
Even with this new wife that he had and got a divorce, his MO was the same, following her around there in Alabama.
Karen and her friends and family said that David often would follow Karen around, that he was monitoring where she was at, that David would call her.
He even told us he followed her to a local store and got into the back of the car.
As for Cayley, she filed a police report after she claimed David's alleged harassment continued. In coordination with Alabama authorities, investigators back in Tennessee check up on what David Swift has been doing.
When he was put on a bond, the judge allowed an ankle monitor to be put on him. That brought to light data showing that he had been to her house on several occasions and following her.
And the sergeant calls me, and I'm like, how's that possible? That he knew where I was going. And he said that we think he's got a tracking device on your car. And I'm like, again?
Police pore over Cayley's car looking for a tracking device. They don't find one, but Cayley says she does find something chilling on her security camera system,
which 2020 was able to obtain.
I pulled up the feed from that night, and there he was in my backyard in the middle of the night. He had to drive 40 minutes one way to get to my house. And at one of the times he saw him at my house was in the middle of the night for an hour and a half. When I see the video, that's when I become very confused, fearful. And why is this happening? Why is he doing it? I didn't give him any reason to. This is a man I was married to. That I shouldn't have been afraid of.
David's charged with felony stalking in Alabama. and his bond in the Karen Johnson Swift murder case was revoked.
Things moved pretty quickly after that. After they got the indictment, they arrested David Swift. There are pictures of him getting in the car.
With his bond revoked, Swift is brought into custody and sent to Tennessee.
He's been charged with stalking down there. They're going to handle those charges once we dissolve this case here.
David Swift has yet to enter a plea to the stalking charge. His lawyer handling the case hasn't responded to 2020's request for comment. With Swift sitting in jail, attention turns back to his fast-approaching trial for Karen's murder. The case is big news in a small town, and both the prosecution and the defense are about to pull back the curtain on the Swifts' private lives.
Did anyone have no clothes on in the hot tub?
What exactly was going on at those hot tub parties? And what did they have to do with Karen's case?
In Tennessee, we'll bring you inside of the courtroom as both sides prepare for trial.
News of David Swift's trial puts Dyersburg on the map in a way locals have never seen.
When there was finally an arrest in Karen's case, you had TV crews, newsprint media, all these people flooding in to Dyersburg.
How big a deal was this trial in Dyersburg?
This trial was huge. It was high profile. It's been the #1 trial of public interest in Dyersburg.
Interestingly, Karen Swift's murder trial doesn't take place here in Dyer County, Tennessee. Instead, a judge issues a change of venue, and David Swift is tried for murder 50 miles from here in Weakley County, Tennessee. As opening statements begin, the prosecution makes it clear that there is no smoking gun against David Swift.
You are not going to see fingerprint analysis. You're not going to see ballistic testing. We will, however, give you several pieces of a puzzle. And when we get through giving you all of those, we think that we're going to have a complete picture. We knew that a jury would want to see some type of weapon that was used for the murder. And it was just, we were never going to have that in this case.
But the prosecution lays out their theory that David Swift didn't actually need a weapon.
We submit that the defendant dragged her to the garage. Once inside the garage, the defendant stomped Karen on her head with such violence that it caved her skull in.
I was shocked when I heard that because I had not heard that before, and I'm like, okay, we'll see the evidence of that.
The autopsy showed that there was starburst fracturing on the left side, which indicated that her head was against something solid and then was struck from the other side. And our theory is that solid object was the concrete in the garage.
The defense counters that the investigators never found any evidence in the garage to back up this theory.
So you actually walked around the garage and looked at it when you first went out there with Mr. Swift?
Yes, sir.
All right. You didn't see any blood or smell of strong bleach, did you?
I did not.
The prosecution then switches gears to focus on Karen's abandoned car. Remember, investigators say that her tire appeared to have been deliberately punctured.
The flat tire, I think, is one of the more significant pieces of the puzzle in this case.
One thing I did observe was a screw that was in groove number 3. The screw was slightly below the tread surface.
Does that have any significance to you in your examination?
Yes. When an object punctures the tire in the tread area, it will actually rebound as it goes through the tire because of the elastic nature and the structure of the tire.
Could you imagine a situation where a screw entered the tire in service like this, where it ran over an object, perhaps a pebble or a stone, that could have forced the screw head beneath the tread surface?
Well, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I would say extremely improbable.
It was their contention that the tire was intentionally deflated as a ruse to make people believe that Karen had actually suffered from a flat tire, and that's why her car was there, when in fact that was not the case.
But the defense brings in their own expert, who testifies that the screw could have accidentally punctured that tire.
There's other vehicles could kick up screws or nails. You know, say you're following a construction vehicle and some are on the back of the trailer and they bounce off and you just happen to be behind it. Who knows what angle it's going to strike your tire at? as you're going down the roadway.
My expert actually did test on a light tire on a similar wheel and, tried to recreate that and explained it to the jury. And I think the jury has to decide which they believe.
The prosecution also calls Karen's friends, Bill and Kathy Bona, to the stand to testify about how they viewed Karen and David's relationship.
She finally started taking action when she started getting the confidence to say, I'm just done. I can't do this anymore. And the controlling and accusations, she was ready to be done with the marriage because she needed to get out.
The defense argues that Karen had full control of everything she did.
She did the behavior she wanted to, and that's just a reality. And as we move on closer to the time she got a divorce, she would come and go as she wished.
Prosecution asked the Bonas about Kathy's 40th birthday celebration, where they hosted an after-party with a group of their friends, which included the use of their hot tub. The Bonas testified that this party led to a confrontation with David Swift.
How were people dressed?
Some people had swimsuits, a couple people did not.
When you say they did not, did they have anything on?
No.
They were nude?
Yes.
Do you know if Miss Swift was in the hot tub?
She was, yes. I mean, I don't remember specifically seeing her, but she enjoyed getting in the hot tub when she came over, in the wintertime when it was cold, so I'm sure she was.
Was Mr. Swift present that night?
He wasn't at first, and he wasn't invited, and he wasn't welcome. Mr. Swift burst into the door, there and startled me and asked where Karen was.
What was his demeanor at that time?
He was agitated, I would say, but I would also say it really caught me off guard. I thought, I don't like this, and I went to get out of the chair to go, ask him to leave, basically, and he came down the stairs and left.
How did he appear when he came down, as far as his attitude and demeanor?
I mean, he came down the stairs and left abruptly and left through the door, quickly enough where I couldn't even really get a word in edgewise.
The prosecution plays David's full police interview in court, where he confirmed that he would sometimes follow Karen to the Bona's house.
Karen started sneaking out of the house, and she would go to be with Kathy and Bill.
Now, when you say go to be with them, what do you mean, go to party with them?
Go party and naked in the hot tub in the backyard.
There was a lot of information about the hot tub parties and all of that, so it kind of verified the rumors that were going around that something somewhat wild was going on.
And there is key testimony still ahead as one emotional witness makes waves.
What can we call you next witness? Ashley Swift.
And David's own daughter prepares to testify at her father's trial. What will she say when she takes the stand? Inside the Weakley County Courthouse, attorney Daniel Taylor dives into one of the most memorable cases of his career.
I've been a trial lawyer for 32 years, and it's the most media attention on any particular case that I've had. This is 2011. After all those years, there's been no scientific breakthrough or anything. There's been nothing new that's come in or anything. After all this time, there was a charge.
The defense contends that the reason David would follow Karen was because he was worried about what was going on at those hot tub parties.
There were issues about conduct and things that were going on, adult parties, things about hot tub parties, and just some things that maybe some others considered not appropriate.
They call her friend, Robin Alford, who testifies that she saw Karen passed out at Kathy Bona's birthday party.
Did you see Karen Swift leave the hot tub and go into the house?
I did. I witnessed her get up. She looked to me as if she was hot and woozy kind of feeling when I walked in, and I witnessed her laying on the floor.
Did you, were you aware whether or not when you first met the Swifts that they drank alcohol or not?
Karen never drank before she came to Dyersburg, never. And I don't think that she could handle her alcohol at all.
The defense points out that in his police interview, David did express concern for Karen's welfare.
I'd have to go get her and drive her home. They call me. And so I was always concerned and worried about her. There was several times I found her in compromising situations. And I did get upset. And I said, Karen, please, why are you doing this?
The defense was simple. David Swift did not kill Karen Swift. They said it could have been a random act by somebody who was just passing by, either in a car or on foot.
They didn't compare the fingerprints. They just tested David Swift. They had tunnel vision.
The defense also argues that David had a serious knee injury affecting his mobility, so he wouldn't have been physically able to dispose of Karen's body.
They said he had this injured leg, so he could not have possibly picked her up and placed her in the cemetery.
Did you notice anything about his leg or how he was walking?
He had a knee brace on, and he had crutches.
Multiple witnesses for the prosecution dispute the seriousness of David's knee injury.
Was he using crutches?
I've never seen no crutches on Saturday.
Do you appear to be injured in any way?
You could see him using his crutches while he was talking, but after he got done talking and they went in the house, he just walked like he didn't need crutches anymore. I thought that was strange.
Even if he is faking it, it's still there's a visual there. The jury is repeatedly seeing people get on the stand and say, yes, I saw him on these crutches. Yes, I saw him on these crutches.
The defense also disagrees with the prosecution's account of what happened inside the Swift home on the night of Karen's murder.
So part of the prosecution's theory of the case was that David comes into Karen's room, takes Ashley, the daughter, out of the bed and goes and puts her in bed with the sister Cayley. He returns to the room and Karen is either asleep or in a very incapacitated state, and then something happens where he ends her life.
Then the defense calls an essential witness to challenge that theory.
Would you tell everybody your name?
Ashley Swift. I was nervous to go on the stand, and they decided to call me early. And so in that moment, I did freak out a little bit, just because I hadn't mentally prepared myself.
Ashley, who was only 9 years old when she saw her mom for the last time, describes what she remembers about the hours before Karen disappeared.
You're not used to testifying, so let me just ask you a few things, okay?
Okay.
When your mother picked you up, did she pick you up in her car?
She did.
And where did y'all go after that?
We went home, back to our house where my sister and my dad were.
And do you recall getting out of the car or going to the house? Or do you recall everything about that night?
Yeah, we came into the house and we went to sleep in her bedroom. I didn't really prepare for trial. Whatever was asked was what was asked, and however I answered was however I answered, and I told the truth in everything that I said.
And Ashley testifies that it wasn't her father who moved her from the bed that fateful night.
Oh, I know it was my mother.
How do you know that?
It's instinct to know your mother versus somebody else. You have that bond with that person and you know who it is.
But you didn't actually see her.
No, but I felt her. There were some times during my testimony where they were trying to, I think, trick me into thinking that what I felt and knew was something else, and I made sure to own that. It was my testimony.
So you actually don't know for sure then, do you?
I mean, I have a pretty good instinct to feel what my mother feels like.
Seeing his oldest daughter take the stand becomes a visibly emotional ordeal for David.
I know that it was physically tough, and he knew it was difficult being asked questions.
And finally, after 2 weeks of heated exchanges and moving testimony, there are fireworks inside the jury room where lines are drawn in the sand.
It was divided pretty much down the middle.
It was basically the guys against the girls.
As the courtroom holds its breath for a verse of emotionally charged testimony in David Swift's murder trial, it was time for the lawyers on both sides to make their final plea to the jury.
Karen and David Swift's marriage ended sometime around 3:30 a.m. on October 30th, 2011. Sadly, it didn't end the way Karen had envisioned it might when she filed for divorce earlier that month from David. My job in closing argument was to convince the jury that there was only one person that could have done this. And that's what I attempted to thread all the evidence together and present them with a coherent theory of what happened that evening.
There was only one person on the planet that could have killed Karen Swift, and it was David.
How do you think the prosecution did in presenting its case to the jurors?
I think that General Goodman had a very, very difficult case. It was an inherited case. It was very old evidence. I think that he did the absolute best that he could to try to bring justice to Karen Swift.
The prosecutor said that he would put the puzzle together, but the puzzle was incomplete. And so that's exactly what I argued. And that his version of the offense and what he claimed happened was incorrect or inconsistent with what was proven. There is no proof to support the state's theory in this case. You have heard all of my questions. You have heard all of the witnesses. The state said that this was a puzzle that they would put together for a complete picture. There is no complete picture.
In order to return a verdict, it is necessary that each juror agree thereto. Your verdict must be unanimous.
As it was going to the jury, we all kind of sat around and hugged. A bunch of family friends showed up, and we were sitting there trying to figure out, oh, what if the jury's saying this? What if they're saying that? But we really didn't know what was going on in that jury room.
We started deliberating. Why don't you think he's guilty? Why do you think he's guilty? We took an initial vote just to see where everybody was, and it was divided pretty much down the middle.
It was basically the guys against the girls.
According to juror David Liggins, some of those male jurors felt there just wasn't enough evidence to convict David Swift.
If you stomp somebody's head on concrete good enough to fracture her skull like it was fractured and busted, and then he can beat every law enforcement and science in the state, I don't believe that's possible this day and age. No physical evidence.
But for other jurors, they say David Swift's behavior towards Karen couldn't be ignored.
In my heart, I really thought he did something when he knew where she was at and what she was doing, because he was following her. That made me think that, yes, he did something.
As the jury was deliberating, things were very tense, and you could sense the tension minute by minute.
I actually was not surprised that the jury was deliberating as long as they did. Anytime you have a circumstantial case, you're going to have a lot of discussions, you're going to have a lot of opinions.
When the jury went out, it was tense on both sides. Both sides were just waiting. You have no choice other than to talk to your client, talk to his family. And so he obviously was nervous, and it could mean either him going home or either him staying, in custody.
After hours of fruitless deliberations, the jury tells the judge they were unable to reach a decision. He instructs them to keep trying.
After 10, 11 hours, you're getting tired.
Mentally exhausted. Everybody was so tired.
They couldn't reach a decision, so they stayed and they went home, and then they came back.
It got a little heated, but anytime you got difference of opinions, it's eventually going to get a little heated.
Finally, after 2 days of deliberation, the jury announces it has reached a decision.
When we walked back in there, everybody was looking, of course. They're going to see if they can tell whether you voted not guilty or guilty. Anybody would have voted like we did. But I do remember looking out in the gallery.
I saw one lady, she was shaking, and the longer it took, it was obvious to me that she was becoming more nervous, and this was pretty much the scene inside the courthouse.
I just prayed we had done the right thing.
Madam Foreperson, has the jury reached a verdict in this case?
Deliberation, the jury has come back in David Swift's murder trial.
Has the jury reached a verdict in this case?
No, Your Honor.
Do you feel like that it is likely that the jury on continued deliberations will reach a verdict?
No, sir.
I think the best word to describe what happened as the verdicts were being read was shock.
Does the jury agree on the highest level of offense that the defendant is either guilty or not guilty?
Yes.
What is the verdict in that?
Not guilty.
The jury came back not guilty on first-degree murder, not guilty on second-degree murder, and they were hung on voluntary manslaughter.
Do you all believe that the jury is hopelessly deadlocked with respect to the charge of voluntary manslaughter? I see everybody nodding their head yes.
I was just sitting there in the chair. I was just kind of just numb. I was like, I can't believe this. We spent all this time presenting the facts, and apparently they just didn't get it. The jury didn't get it.
The first two officers on the scene said that they did walk into the garage that day. I'm sorry, you could smell bleach if he had bleach in there. You could see the blood if he ain't cleaned it up yet. When they gave me a scenario, that's where he done it. And then they can't find nothing. That ended the case for me.
I think it stopped at manslaughter because I felt like he did something. In my heart, I really thought he did something.
When the verdict came in, your reaction?
Honestly, I really was not surprised. Reasonable doubt was everywhere.
I think the way that the prosecution laid it out was the only person that could have done it was David Swift. They didn't present proof that said that it was David Swift. If I removed myself and my knowledge of the case, and I was an independent person, I would have had to have rendered a verdict of not guilty.
One detail that the prosecution wasn't allowed to introduce at trial, David's indictment for allegedly stalking his second wife, Cayley. But some jurors say hearing about that accusation wouldn't have made a difference.
The only thing, in my opinion, that would have changed my outcome was the scenario the prosecution gave. Yes, that woman was beat to death, but they can't convince me that David done it.
Let me take you to the penultimate moment, which is, what was it like to hear the jury say not guilty?
Man, it was great. I thought, finally, it was overwhelming.
Although he was acquitted of murdering Karen, David Swift's legal ordeal is far from over. He's still facing that charge of stalking his second wife and remains in jail as he faces retrial on that voluntary manslaughter charge.
I'm disappointed that the jury didn't reach a decision that I thought they should as to all the offenses. And that's the jury system. And that's why we'll have a retrial.
We were confident going into the first trial. We're equally confident for a second trial. And I think that it's something that we can't give up on. It's just something that we have an obligation to do.
I'm not really sure what you expect to get out of a retrial when we've already seen the presentation of all this evidence before, and everybody has pretty much already formed a decision on it.
And today, 13 years after her mother disappeared, Ashley Swift, Karen and David's daughter, still steadfastly believes in her father's innocence.
Moving forward, I'm not exactly 100% sure what's going to happen. I hope that we can get my dad home soon. He is currently sitting in jail for something that, he shouldn't even be in jail for.
David has missed out on a lot of special things. He has missed the birth of a grandchild, his daughter's graduation from dental hygiene school, his oldest daughter, Ashley. He has missed Cayley graduating high school.
What does justice for Karen Swift look like?
I think that in a situation like this, I think that we have to unfortunately reconcile with the fact that there may not be justice.
I will always remember Karen, and I think everybody should remember Karen by her love for children, that she was a great mother and she was a great friend.
I think one of the things I want people to know most about my mom is she's a very caring and nurturing person, and she would do anything for any of us kids or my dad. I would love to have my dad around again and, really fight for justice for my mom.
Kent Police, where's your emergency?
Hiya, who do I report a missing person to?
Who's actually missing?
It's my wife. She walked out early hours Wednesday morning and she ain't been back since.
It didn't add up. Why would she be gone for so long and why wouldn't she tell anyone?
Maybe she had mental health issues and she had enough.
Some people do find they can't cope with the pressures of life and wander off.
The police, they were searching the area with sniffer dogs, police helicopter.
It was much worse than we thought.
And I was like, am I under arrest then?
In the heart of the Kent countryside lies the quaint village of Northbourne.
It's a very picturesque village, very rural setting, close to the coast, and actually a lovely place to be. Lots of nice walks through the fields and woodland nearby.
Everybody knows everybody. There is that sense of community and a sense of it being a safe environment.
We have quite a nice village hall in a pub, surrounded by farmland. It's quite a nice, quiet place to live. Crime is not generally a problem here.
With such a welcoming community, it was the perfect place for Micah Cudworth to set up home.
Micah was born in Poland, but she came to live in Kent, and she came to see Kent as being her home.
She came over presumably to have a better life, to have a new adventure, and settled here and was well known and liked here.
She didn't come to England on her own. She was married before, and she came with the partner that she had at the time. But they separated and she met Jonathan.
John was obviously a local lad and lived in this area all his life as far as he went to school in the area, joined the military, came out of that eventually and got a job here as a forklift truck driver.
Jonathan is a really sweet kid. He is really gentle, quite quiet, very reserved. And he came from a nice family. They were all good people.
With an opportunity for a second chance at love. In 2013, Micah and Jonathan tied the knot. And she found a safe haven with her new extended family in Kent.
Micah's family still lived in Poland. Her only family in England was actually Jonathan's family. She deemed her friends in England to be her family, so living and remaining here was important to her.
She was very involved with his family. They were like one big family, and I think she loved that. I think that's what her intention of coming here. She wanted that family sentiment, and, you know, she got that.
It didn't take long for the happy couple to settle in well to village life.
Mikey was beautiful, funny, fun-loving. She was just a real bright energy. She could make you laugh, make you smile.
They were an ordinary young couple which was missing in the village. So it was nice, it was a pleasure to see them.
Micah and Jonathan were a devoted couple.
As any normal couple would. They'd walk down to the end of the road. Micah would go rushing off wherever work. She'd always smile, she'd always, you know, put her hand up. John, I would see occasionally on his way down to the pub, and occasionally on the way back from the pub.
And it wasn't long before Micah took up part-time work, which put her centre stage in the community.
She had a job as a barmaid in a village pub. And there were lots and lots of people would go in that pub. Quite a small size, but with a lovely big garden. And I think in that pub, it's very close-knit, you know, it's very friendly. And to have had very friendly, bubbly and attractive barmaid there, she would have been a very well-known and very well-liked girl.
8 years since her move from Poland, Micah appeared happy with her life in the UK. But she may not have been as content as it seemed.
Kent Police, where's your emergency?
Hiya, who do I report a missing person to?
Who's actually missing?
It's my wife.
She came home about 11:30 because she went to meet somebody for a drink. She had a little bit of a row and she stormed off and she ain't been back since.
So is she vulnerable in any way due to disability, mental health, or any other factors?
She has been a bit down lately.
Okay.
Micah had gone out after work and had a drink with a friend. She'd come home late. They'd had an argument. She'd stormed off. The next day, she was still missing. And then the following morning, Jonathan reported her as missing.
Worried about Micah's whereabouts, officers do a quick search of the house for clues. They discover she had taken just a few essentials with her, keys and a handbag. But her car is still in the driveway, and her mobile phone is switched off. Concerned about her state of mind, officers speak to villagers for clues.
My neighbour next door to me told me Micah had gone missing. The police came round, explained what they were doing, interviewed us all.
You know, asking the questions, have you seen anything? Have you heard anything?
But with no information from neighbours, concern grows as to Micah's whereabouts and her state of mind. Kent police decide to issue a missing persons appeal to the public.
We received a press release from police to say that Micah had gone missing. It's human instinct, so it instantly struck a chord and we thought, something's wrong here. It didn't add up. Why would she be gone for so long and why wouldn't she tell anyone?
Naturally you think, God, this woman must be so unwell. Maybe she had mental health issues and she kind of like had enough and left the house in the middle of the night. It was sad.
Kent Police, where's your emergency?
Hiya, who do I report a missing person to?
Who's actually missing?
In the quaint village of Northbourne, unease is growing over Micah Cudworth's whereabouts. She's been missing for more than 24 hours.
In the village, there was a real concern as to where Micah might be.
From our point of view, it was a case each day we wanted to know where was Micah, had she been found.
Concerned about her state of mind, her loving husband Jonathan has reported her missing. Worried that her low mood had led her to look for comfort outside of the family home.
So is she vulnerable in any way?
No, but she has been a bit down lately.
Okay.
You don't know, but it wouldn't be unusual. It could be some form of mental illness. Some people can't cope with the normal pressures of life and wander off.
Life gets difficult and life gets tough, which it does for all of us, and we all face challenging circumstances in our lives.
Having walked out in the middle of the night after an argument, the village can't imagine what's going through her husband's mind.
I actually reached out to John and said, hey, this is really terrible. And I remember saying to him, just hang on, hopefully she's going to find her and she'll get the help that she needs.
After 24 hours with no contact from Micah and with no clues to her whereabouts, police start considering the possibility she could have harmed herself or met someone out to cause her harm. A full-scale search is launched.
Suddenly, lots of police vans turn up. From going from seeing no police cars or hardly any police cars to being descended on by police was a little bit of a shock.
The police, they were searching the area nearby. That was with sniffer dogs, police helicopter.
You bring in resources, dogs, police dogs, searching fields, especially in the rural area of East Kent, there's a vast amount of agriculture. You might get the helicopter camera up with the infrared to see if you can find someone in the field somewhere that's still alive.
Police continue to scour the surrounding areas and question Micah's family and friends. But it appears after walking out into the night, she simply disappeared.
Generally speaking, most missing persons turn up very shortly, certainly within, if not 24 hours sooner. This was then 30-odd hours. And then, of course, 36, 48 hours. And you always live in hope, but of course the longer it goes on, you always fear the worst.
As the days pass, husband Jonathan and the rest of the family desperately cling on for any hope that Micah will be found safe and well.
I was devastated for him. I felt for him, I felt for his family. I just wanted to help them, support them.
We responded as best we could, and the church was open. We had a small little area as a place where people could come for prayer and reflection.
As the local search fails to uncover any clue as to where Micah has gone, detectives decide to increase the media campaign with the hope of reaching out nationally and internationally.
Police are urging anyone who may have seen Micah Cudworth to contact them. The barmaid walked out of her home just before midnight on Tuesday and hasn't been seen since. Polish-born Micah from Northbourne was last seen wearing white trainers, grey tracksuit bottoms and carrying a black handbag.
When the police released her photograph, that's when the public interest really did peak. She looked like a bubbly, happy, kind and well-liked person. So the public interest really did come alive.
There was a lot of talk on social media. You can imagine when you live in these little villages, somebody goes missing and the local newspaper saying, have you seen this person? It was everywhere.
Media campaigns are important, and very often by media campaigns and using the local media especially, you get sightings. The trouble with sightings is you can very often get people ringing in with genuine callers who believe they've seen perhaps the missing person when in fact it's not them at all. So you have to be careful that you're not taking down blind alleys.
And the longer Micah remains missing, the more rumours start to circulate throughout the village.
I think Micah, in the crudest sense, ticked a lot of boxes. As a barmaid, she would have been very popular. She was pretty attractive and supposedly quite bubbly, so she would have been very liked.
Rumours are rife, and particularly in a village. People start talking, she was a little bit too fond of a customer down at the pub.
She was very friendly with certain individuals, and one man in particular, and it was suspected by some people that she was having an affair.
Could Micah be with this man? Had she walked out into the arms of a new lover? Suddenly, there's hope this could be the case. A post from Micah appears on social media, written in Polish.
Micah's friends had received Facebook messages from Micah saying, "It's okay, I'm all right, I just need some space." But that hope was soon dashed when the friends had spoken to police to say that the messages they'd received weren't quite grammatically correct.
Some of her friends were questioning the grammatical use of Polish. It wasn't her usual way of speaking, as it were, on messages.
They couldn't see that Micah would have written them like that, and something just wasn't adding up.
Clearly, if she was sending these messages out, they weren't being sent by her.
But if it isn't her, then who is writing these messages? Detective suspicion that something sinister has happened to Micah grows. And they widen their inquiries and home in on certain people.
The persons of interest would have been the man from the pub who was allegedly having an affair with her, and indeed any other customers that would be regular customers in the pub, because if she's having an affair with somebody, there'll be other customers in the pub who will be able perhaps to provide some significant information with regard to their friendship.
Police trace the man Micah is suspected of having an affair with. He admits he had a drink with Micah on the night of her disappearance. He is questioned. Concerned by the latest development, Micah and Jonathan's friends and family rally round him.
Jonathan had called some friends and asked them to come round and give him support. They came round and they spent time with him.
4 days after Micah was reported missing, Kent police make a shocking announcement.
Police investigating the disappearance of 36-year-old Micah Cudworth have said they've made an arrest. The barmaid from Northbourne went missing 5 days ago and hasn't been sighted since. Police say they are growing increasingly concerned for Miss Cudworth's safety.
What's transpired, it was, yes, much worse than we thought.
Kent Police, where's your emergency?
It's my wife. She walked out early hours Wednesday morning and she ain't been back since.
In the Kent village of Northbourne, police investigating the disappearance of barmaid Micah Cudworth now suspect she may have been murdered. Believing messages Micah sent her friends after she went missing were actually sent by someone else, police question a man she was suspected of having an affair with.
The police released a statement to say that they'd arrested somebody, a man, in connection with Micah's disappearance.
But the man they arrested is not her suspected lover, but her husband, Jonathan Cudworth.
One of John's sisters said he'd been arrested, and I was like, what?
The news sends shockwaves across the village. How could this loving husband have anything to do with her disappearance?
It's hard to describe, really. It's just a lot of disbelief, I think.
The initial reaction for people in the immediate vicinity would be shock, surprise, nice couple.
When somebody's been arrested in connection with someone's disappearance, the public interest really does step up. That's what people then really start to talk about at the school gates, in the pub.
As rumours circulate around the village, it is revealed that Jonathan has been arrested on suspicion of GBH after police visited his house and noticed drops of blood by the front door, with Jonathan admitting that he had a minor altercation before Micah stormed off. Officers secure the house as a potential crime scene and carry out a search of an outbuilding.
And it was outside by the shed that they found some drops of blood.
Inside the outbuilding, officers discover a blood-stained doormat and cat basket. Both items are immediately seized and taken for forensic testing.
I would think that was the time that this became a homicide, murder investigation.
Gradually, the realisation came that she may have actually been killed, and the police presence was becoming, in that sense, rather more sinister.
In custody, police believe the evidence points to Jonathan having more than just hit Micah.
During police interviews, he strenuously denied that he had anything to do with Micah's disappearance.
Jonathan, he was a nice lad. He wasn't mean. I don't remember him being aggressive or angry or volatile.
Jonathan admits he has Micah's Facebook password and posted messages pretending to be from her in Polish. But he says it was to stop her friends from harassing him. He says the blood found was from a minor altercation. Police decide to charge him with murder. But there's one problem. 7 days since she was last seen, there's still no sign of Micah, dead or alive. Officers widen their search both inside Micah's home and the surrounding areas. And suddenly, there's a breakthrough. A large amount of blood is discovered in the sitting room beneath the rug. And more blood is found in the boot of the family car. Police discover Jonathan had bought the rug in nearby Sandwich after Micah had gone missing. Slowly, they start to piece together Jonathan's movements since Micah's disappearance. The search for her is becoming desperate, and the family turn to their friend Ali.
Ali Austin is a psychic. She was contacted by Jonathan's family and asked if she would be able to help in the search for Micah.
So to label myself, I'm a fortune teller. I'm a psychic, I'm a clairvoyant, a clairaudient. I see, hear and sense things. And a message came through, and it was from one of John's sisters. And it said, "Hi Ali, is there any chance you can do a reading for me?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." And they were like, "Would you come out and search with us?" And I was like, "Of course I'm going to come out and search with you." And then we went off and we continued to search for 16, 17 hours a day.
We have known of a psychic being brought in before to help try to locate a body. The body has never been found, but sometimes that can be of help to the family because they feel that they're getting somebody to help them. When somebody has lost a member of their family, they will cling on to any kind of hope that they might still be alive.
I just wanted to help this family. I was just like, these poor people, this is horrific. She needs to be laid to rest. And that was all I focused on.
As Ali joins the search for Micah, along with family and friends, police discover video evidence from the night following Micah's disappearance.
A friend of mine, he had a CCTV, which was pointing out to the road. And I think it was John said he didn't go out of the property on that particular night, but it proved to be just after 2 o'clock, I think, in the morning, there was his car going by.
Detectives believe the 10-minute trip is significant in their hunt for Micah and concentrate their search to a 5-minute drive of the house. Further CCTV from earlier that day also proves key to the case against Jonathan.
There is capture of CCTV images from various areas, which includes him in a shop buying cleaning materials and attending a deal pier, throwing items which turn out, we think, to be a handbag and a phone off the end of the pier.
I think that that's a vital cog that it enabled this investigation to keep on turning and for them to find out what had actually happened.
With police believing the CCTV proves Jonathan is responsible for Micah's disappearance, it also shows he made a trip to a refuse tip with multiple large bags. The search for Micah shifts to a landfill site. As the police search spreads, Ali Austin is concentrating her search in Eastry, where Jonathan grew up.
Quite a few of us were out, and I was like, why don't I try dowsing? Dowsing is a method that has been used for centuries to find objects. Even when I say it, it sounds ridiculous, but we had nothing to lose. I was exhausted. We were in a field, and there was me and Jonathan's sisters, and I used this ring. So I took this ring, and you hold it. So we had this map, and I just got everyone to close their eyes and concentrate, and I was like, just say Micah, like, where are you? So we were sitting there, and I'll be honest, even I'm like, this is ridiculous, you know, this is ridiculous. And the ring stopped on a point on the map, on a roundabout.
Ali and the family make their way to the roundabout and immediately begin to comb the surrounding fields.
I just remember pulling up, and I ran off away from my car, and it was a rape field, and it was like 5 foot high, and you can't move. I've never been in a rape field, you can't move in that stuff, it's all intertwined. And I remember like literally being like this in the field, running like in a zigzag. And then the next thing I know, next thing I know, I was standing on her. And she was in the field. So when I found her, I just remember screaming to everybody. I found her and told everybody not to move and not to come. But that was the point that her body had been abandoned, yes. And this is where we waited, and obviously it was, from that point, it was a crime scene. I didn't even think about what would happen if I did actually find her. I never gave that a thought. But then when I'm standing there, looking at her, 12 days after her life was taken, I can never unsee that.
Kent police have said that the body of a woman found in a field near Eastry in Kent is that of missing 36-year-old Micah Cudworth.
The news that everyone feared has now become a reality.
There was a real sense of grief and loss. For that to happen was, really quite shocking for people and disturbing. It's a sort of incident you would more likely expect to happen in a big city.
It's a sad thing more than anything else. And Micah was suddenly not being here anymore. It was upsetting, and there was a certain disbelief with that. When you lose anybody in a community, it's tragic, very tragic.
Micah's body is taken to the mortuary where a post-mortem is carried out to determine a cause of death.
The post-mortem reveals Micah was stabbed, I think, 4 times. It would appear she'd lost half the blood in her body. The injuries she sustained as a result of those stab wounds were clearly fatal.
With Jonathan already in custody, detectives turn their attention to the circumstances surrounding the discovery of Micah's body, and specifically Ali Austin's involvement.
This psychic comes into the frame. She used to go to school, I think, with Cudworth. She practices her psychic medium, and apparently, as a result of some readings that she's done, she finds the body before the police. It's bizarre, absolutely bizarre. I would certainly be having the lady in questioning.
Suddenly, Ali Austin finds herself at the centre of a murder investigation.
I was told to present myself at Folkestone Police Station, and I rode to Folkestone Police Station on my motorbike the next morning. And I was showed to a room, and there was 2 or 3 kind of like detectives there. And the next thing I know, they brought all these maps out, and they're going to me, put a black cross where your mum and dad's house is. So I was like, okay. So I looked at this massive aerial map. I put a black cross where my mum and dad's. They went, put a black cross where Jonathan Cudworth's mum and dad's house is. So I put a black cross where they live. Put a black cross where you found Micah. So I did that. And I remember at that point, something in my head going, this isn't right. This is not, why are you asking me this? This is ridiculous. And then I asked for a break, and I went to get my cigarettes from my crash helmet, and they went, leave your helmet here. And I was like, pardon? And they were like, can you leave your helmet, please? And I was like, why, am I under arrest then? And they were like, no, but you're not allowed to leave.
Ali Austin's involvement sparks a lot of interest from the national media.
It had all of the ingredients for a juicy murder story. The first thing you think is, the husband's done it. But then, a psychic sniffs out the body. That is the sort of thing that, whether people believe it or not, they're interested in, and they want to read, they want to find out everything. It refreshed the story.
But Ali's potential involvement is soon eclipsed following a revelation that on the night of the 10th of May, Jonathan had called a family member from prison and made a startling admission.
He admitted to the crime, the killing.
During the call, Jonathan disclosed the area where he dumped Micah's body. Using this vital info, his family had then turned to Ali to help pinpoint the exact spot. Following this revelation, the police are happy she played no other part.
I do believe I was a suspect. I'm like, you know, local psychic. Maybe I put her there and then wanted the glory of, like, I found a body. Morally, like, that just rips my soul to pieces to think that at some point in a police interview room or a police station somewhere, I genuinely believe that I might have played a part in putting that woman there. But they don't know me. There was a lot of coincidences. You know, I can't deny that.
With Micah's body discovered and Jonathan charged, the question remains, why did this loving husband murder his wife? And how? Has been charged with the murder of his wife, Micah. Despite the evidence against him, Jonathan pleads not guilty to murder. He claims diminished responsibility because of a momentary loss of control. And the case is sent for trial.
Having admitted to the killing and him charged with murder, it's then, of course, up to a judge and a jury, isn't it? That's all the police can do, is put forward the facts, the evidence that they can obtain, and any explanation that the defendant may give.
On the 7th December 2015, the trial begins at Canterbury Crown Court. And the question on everyone's lips is, what could have possibly led to Jonathan losing control and killing his wife, Micah?
John had a trust issues. You know, he didn't trust Micah. He thought Micah was having an affair.
My neighbour, you know, said that there was problems, probably, with their marriage. He'd heard them arguing. She met somebody else, which was one of the reasons for the domestics.
So police found that Jonathan had been tracking Micah's whereabouts through a phone app, which suggests that he had a growing sense of paranoia about where she was, what she was doing, and who she was spending time with.
The court hears what Micah and Jonathan had been arguing about the night she was killed.
Jonathan had been questioning Micah about where she'd been and who she'd been with. And he lashed out in a jealous rage.
The jury hears Jonathan's prepared statement, claiming that Micah had admitted to an affair and was goading him aggressively. The defence being that he momentarily lost control.
Jonathan said that Micah had become aggressive, and he, as a reaction, had felt around for the weapon, and he'd hit her.
This was some tragic crime of passion, that he was actually the victim of this really strong-willed woman that was having an affair. They rowed, he's gone mad, and he's put a knife in her.
The court is stunned to hear Jonathan's version of events. But had he really killed her in a moment of madness?
Crimes of passion, of course they can occur, you know. None of us could say we haven't got it in us. There's people, you know, they might do something in the heat of the moment, regret it, oh no, and go, oh my God, you know, this has happened. It could happen to a lot of people in all different scenarios.
However, details from the post-mortem are read out in court, which questions Jonathan's defence, that he simply lashed out. Not only had Micah suffered a blunt force hit to the head, but she had bruises to her wrists and neck, along with a knife attack that the prosecution claim intended to end her life.
I realised that a crime of passion, a mistake, is maybe lashing out, pushing, shoving. You you know, maybe he was cutting apples at the time, maybe he did have a knife in his hand. But she was stabbed 4 times. So she's been stabbed through her heart and then continuously stabbed on the upper part of her body, which corresponds with what my eyes saw.
And soon it becomes clear that Jonathan has a checkered history with relationships.
Police subsequently found out that there was a loose history of domestic violence, which included another ex-girlfriend and Micah herself.
The court hears there had been one prior report to the police of a domestic verbal altercation between Jonathan and Micah.
Micah notified the police that she was a victim of domestic abuse and that she lived in fear of Jonathan. This wasn't a random crime of passion.
It appears Micah and Jonathan's relationship had broken down completely, and she had made plans to leave him.
Since speaking to her family and her friends, she'd visited Poland 2 weeks before her death. She was leaving him. She'd saved £700, hidden in a drawer. She was going to be free of him. It is alleged that she had met somebody else, and whether she was going to have a life with them, I don't know. And she was confident that it was over. She returned to England, ready to prepare to start her new life.
But before Micah could move on without Jonathan in her life, events conspired to stop her in her tracks on the night of the 29th of April.
She'd been working at the local pub, and she came home sometime around 11:30, 12 o'clock.
Phone analysis from that evening reveals that Jonathan had become more and more irate as the evening wore on, and was continually asking where Micah was in text messages.
It transpired in court that after Jonathan had killed Micah, he dragged her body to a compost heap in the garden and left her there while he worked out how to dispose of her body.
I believe she was behind the shed and he covered her body in grass cuttings. Everyone was around and that is where she lay.
On the next day, Cudworth then got rid of her handbag and phone off the end of the pier and bought some cleaning up materials from a local shop.
And then he loaded Micah's body into the back of the car and drove her off to the field where he disposed of her.
The following morning, Jonathan calls the police to report Micah missing.
Kent Police, where's your emergency?
It's my wife. She walked out early hours Wednesday morning and she ain't been back since.
So is she vulnerable in any way?
No, but she has been a bit down lately.
Okay.
The extent that Jonathan had gone to conceal the fact that he had taken Micah's life. He'd tried to cover his tracks by sending messages to her friends. I get the feeling from this behaviour that it's very calculated, it's cold, and it shows no remorse.
During a gruelling trial at Canterbury Crown Court, the evidence against Jonathan appears overwhelming. A sustained, brutal attack on Micah, covering his tracks by disposing of Micah's body and her belongings, as well as a checkered history of past relationships. The jury retires to consider its verdict. Jonathan is found not guilty of Micah Cudworth's murder.
We were so surprised. We thought that there'd been such a strong case for murder against Jonathan, and to find out that he'd been found guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter.
As he admitted to stabbing and killing his wife before the trial, the jury accepts his version of events that of killing her through diminished responsibility.
I think Mr. Cudworth was an extremely lucky person to get off a murder charge. Very lucky, I think, because I've seen cases where, you know, similar sort of things, and jury have come back guilty of murder.
With the lesser conviction of manslaughter, Jonathan is sentenced to 15 years in prison.
It's appalling. It is appalling. How can her life be worth 15 years? You know, how do we stop this? How do we deter people from going that far? We need stricter sentences. You know, a life should mean life.
Even with the case behind them, the local community still feel the impact of Micah's death.
The sad thing with an event like this is it just has really horrible consequences for everybody. For the families trying to move forward in this situation, and it leaves a scar on the community.
It's her resting place, isn't it? It's not ideal. I know her resting place, final resting place is now in Poland, as it should be, but it's where her story ended, isn't it? And it should never have been that way. She didn't deserve this. Regardless of whether or not she was leaving him, regardless of whether or not she was dating somebody else, the penalty that she paid was atrocious. And it will stay with us, it will stay with me. It's an absolute tragedy, and it's a tragedy for our community.